Welcome to this Flame webinar, the first of a series of webinars for 2017. I'm James Henderson, Director of the Natural Gas Programme at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, and I'll be chairing the session, which will last around 30 minutes. Before we start, I should also mention that we'll be live texting this webinar, so you can follow the conversation using the hashtag FlameWebinar. Today's topic is the investment outlook for energy, an important theme for everyone involved in the industry because recent trends in investment point to a significant reorientation of the global energy economy and also pose important questions concerning energy security over the next decade. The sharp drop in oil prices has led to a significant fall in upstream investment. Although some of this decline has been offset by reduced unit costs, there's a clear question over whether a lack of spending now will lead to shortage in a few years and a potential price spike. In the gas sector, the issue is perhaps more existential. Low gas prices have caused an almost complete halt in FIDs for major projects, but competition from cheap coal and renewables is raising the question of when and if companies will ever recover the confidence to make new project development decisions. In the coal sector, historic overinvestment and downward pressure on demand due to environmental factors again puts future investment spending in doubt. The electricity sector is the main area where spending has been increasing, reaching record levels in 2015, with renewables as the main focus. But even here, questions need to be asked, as we do not appear to be spending enough on low-carbon technology overall to meet climate targets. Finally, investment in energy efficiency measures is increasing, which could and should constrain demand for fossil fuels in particular. However, the consequent negative impact on fossil fuel prices could in turn undermine the economic logic for further spending on efficiency. In order to address this complex matrix of issues, it is a pleasure to welcome Lászlo Varro, the Chief Economist of the IEA and head of the team that produced the agency's recent World Investment Report. Lászlo will speak for approximately 10 minutes, after which there'll be around 15 minutes available for discussion and Q&A. I would encourage everyone to send through their questions throughout the session using the box you can see on the screen in front of you. With that, I will hand over to Lászlo.
Thank you very much. Good morning. This is Lászlo Varro. I'm the Chief Economist of the International Energy Agency. And I will give you a brief overview of the findings that we had in our investment analysis, the world energy investment. So we are talking about around 2.4% of global GDP, or $1,800 billion. That's the scale of energy investment in the global economy. This has been declining in the past 2 years for two reasons. One, the reaction of the oil and gas industry to declining oil prices. And the second is cost deflation. The cost deflation affected not only renewable technologies, but there has been a very significant cost deflation in the oil and gas industry as well. Now, despite the increasing attention to climate policy, oil and gas is still the largest investment source by far, representing roughly half of global energy investment. Now, renewables represent around 18% of global energy investment, but 17% of that 18 is technologies which generate electricity: wind power, solar power, and hydropower. Now, electricity is a bit less than 1/3 of the global energy system, but this 1/3 absorbs more than 90% of renewable investment. So the impact of renewables is highly asymmetrical. The impact of renewables is a revolutionary game changer in the electricity industry, but the impact of renewables is still marginal in other parts of the energy system, like heavy-duty transport, aviation, or industrial energy use. Now, one very important question of the past 2 years was how energy efficiency investment performs in a period of persistent low fossil fuel prices. And we see a very important asymmetry, that in the electricity sector, we believe that the ratcheting up impact of tightened efficiency standards on household electric appliances and also industrial equipment such as electric motors is more powerful than the impact of cheap gas and cheap coal feeding into electricity markets. In pretty much every advanced industrialized country, in Germany, United Kingdom, United States, Australia, or Japan, we have witnessed stagnating or even declining electricity consumption in the past 5 years, despite the reasonably healthy recovery from the financial crisis. And that is primarily due to the strong improvements in appliance and electric motor efficiency. Now, on the other hand, in the transportation sector, there is a clear and measurable impact from the low oil prices to vehicle markets. The most serious impact is in North America, where excise taxes are low and the consumer preference for large, heavy cars is very strong. But we have seen 6 million SUVs sold in China. The average consumption of cars sold in India is increasing, and in Europe you also saw an increasing popularity of larger and heavier cars. Now, electric cars have been doing well, but electric cars still represent 1% of total car sales. So the average efficiency of the other 99% is also crucially important. So in the past 2 years, we have become more optimistic about electric cars, but we also revised our oil demand numbers up. And this is not a contradiction at all. This is the combination of improving electric car technology, but also shifting consumer preferences towards larger and heavier cars. Now, the oil and gas industry reacted to the decline in oil prices in a very determined fashion. We have witnessed 2 years of capex declines of over 25% each. This is historically unprecedented. This has never happened in the 100 years history of the oil and gas industry, so we are in uncharted territory. Now, around 2/3 of the investment spending decline was compensated by cost deflation. And we also think that the substantial proportion of this cost deflation is structural, driven by better project management and also the increasing digitization of the oil and gas industry. But a substantial proportion of that was cyclical, and if and when investment spending recovers, cost inflation might re-emerge. We have absolutely no doubt that the current upstream investment is insufficient to supply oil demand for the longer term. So we have been repeatedly warning about the upcoming tightening of oil markets. Now, specifically in the gas industry, we have tracked LNG investment, where the LNG industry had a quite remarkable investment upswing, first driven by Australia and then the second wave with the United States. So current investment activity is still very, very robust. But these are investment decisions that were made 3, 4, 5 years ago. On a forward-looking basis, we have seen a collapse of investor confidence into new LNG projects as a result of the recent market changes. So in the absence of new FIDs, the LNG investment will fall down the cliff. So essentially, the current abundant LNG market situation is based on investment decisions that were made in a completely different market environment. Now, the conventional power generation investment practically collapsed in Europe. So in Europe, no utility invests in any type of conventional power plant. But conventional power generation investment is still very strong in Asia. And in Asia, new coal-fired generation investment exceeds gas-fired power generation investment by a factor of 6, despite environmental and climate constraints. And even today, there is a substantial new investment in Asia into outdated, low-efficiency, subcritical coal-fired power plants. Now, this robust popularity of coal in Asia is due to several factors, but one very important is the relative capital intensity of the infrastructure. Asia is relying on long-distance imports of both gas and coal. So Japan imports Australian coal, and Japan also imports Australian gas. Now, when you build a power plant in Japan and you want electricity from Australian gas, on average, for a gigawatt-sized power plant, you have to spend $1.1 billion on gas infrastructure to get the gas from Australia to Japan. This would be liquefaction facilities, pipelines, tankers, and so on. This investment need is actually more than the investment need of the power plant itself. If you want the same size power plant running on Australian coal, you have to invest $200 million into infrastructure, railroads, port facilities, and so on. So this 5 times difference in the infrastructure cost explains the very robust competitive position of coal in countries which rely on long-distance imports, and this includes China, India, Japan, and Korea, the 4 biggest economies in Asia. Now, renewable investment is doing very well. In financial terms, renewable investment is not increasing. It has been stagnating at roughly $300 billion per year and it for 5 years. But this stagnation is like saying that a good laptop is $500. This is true today, this was true 5 years ago, and this was true 10 years ago as well. A good laptop is always $500, but with technological progress, you get a very different laptop for your money. So when we run the numbers of how much electricity you get from that $300 billion, that has increased by 33% with cheaper windmills and cheaper solar panels. Now, from wind and solar only, this would have been much more than 33% because their costs have declined by more than half. But we shouldn't forget that hydropower still plays an extremely important role in developing Asia and also in Latin America. And of course, hydropower is a 100-year-old technology which does not display such a rapid technological progress. In terms of its volumes, it's very important, but its composition slows down the average technological progress with renewables. However, there is a tendency to talk about renewables and decentralized energy as if the two were the same thing. The two are very, very different. The overwhelming majority of renewable investment is large-scale utility size and commercial size wind farms and solar power plants, which rely on the electricity network to deliver their electricity to their consumers. So decentralized rooftop solar represents only a small minority of renewable investment. Now, the ability of the electricity network to deal with the variability of renewables is improving, but we still think that flexible gas-fired power generation is going to be essential to manage the power system. So gas-fired power plants play a very, very important role, but their composition and their role will change. And the taste of things to come is Europe, where today around 210 gigawatts of gas-fired power generation capacity generates roughly 500 terawatt-hours of electricity. When we modeled the transition of the European energy system to a low-carbon future, we came to the conclusion that with the decommissioning of coal plants and the large additions of wind and solar, Europe will need around 80 gigawatts more gas-fired power generation capacity, but actual gas-fired power generation will decline by half. So that will require a completely new electricity market design. And the last thing I would touch upon is the emergence of natural gas as a heavy-duty transport fuel. The electric batteries are not powerful enough for heavy-duty transport. So both the trucking sector, especially in the United States and China, and also the shipping industry provides very interesting, very good opportunities for use of gas in the transport sector. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I hand the floor back to James.
Okay, László, thank you very much. That's very interesting indeed. And before we set off, I just encourage everyone again to use the Q&A button on your screens to ask questions of László. We're going to have a conversation to start with. And I guess the first thing I'd like to turn to, László, given we're being sponsored by Flame here, is to ask you a couple of gas questions. Your overall outlook for gas wasn't particularly positive, but we've seen quite a lot of much more upward sloping graphs from a number of oil and gas companies over the past few months. Do you think these companies have just been wildly over-optimistic about the future of gas, or what's your opinion?
No, we are optimistic about the future of gas. We see a couple of important drivers for this. One is that gas is a very versatile fuel. So whereas coal is used almost exclusively in the power generation and the steel industries, gas is used very broadly for industrial heat, in the petrochemicals industry, building heating, power generation, fertilizer manufacturing. So power generation is not the only and not even the dominant driver of the growth of gas. Now, for power generation, I think the main lesson of the past couple of years is prices matter. A good case study is India, which in the past 5 years, India built a modern, high-efficiency combined cycle gas turbine fleet, over 20 gigawatts, which in 2013, 2014 was essentially standing idle because $15 per MBTU LNG prices were extremely unattractive for power generation in India. In the past 2 years, India has been taking advantage of declining LNG prices. LNG imports to India have been increasing quite robustly, and gas-fired power generation was ramping up. So I think I do agree with the oil and gas industry that LNG has a good future. I think what is very important for the industry to keep in mind that costs matter. So some of the LNG projects which had excessive costs might have great difficulty recovering those investment costs. So what the industry have to be very mindful is that LNG is exposed to competition across the energy system. So they have to make sure that LNG projects are delivered with a very efficient, very good project management. But there are also applications where gas demand is less price sensitive. So for example, in northern China requires winter heating. And the use of coal for heating buildings in the winter is one of the main reasons of the air pollution problems. Now, China has a very dedicated program to introduce gas in small-scale applications like winter heating. Around 7 million families connect to the gas grid in China every year. So the number of household consumers is increasing very, very rapidly. Now, nobody thinks that gas will outcompete coal in China on a pure price basis, but there are very robust environmental policies promoting gas. So certainly, I think gas does have a good growth story, but especially in the electricity sector, it will be increasingly exposed to competition.
Okay. We have had a question about CO2 costs. I guess I had a question about the potential impact of carbon taxes, but the question here is about the CO2 cost of Europe's gas supply. LNG, Algerian and Russian gas is far higher than declining North Sea as a function of distance. What do you think about the CO2 cost of gas in Europe and potentially a carbon price as well?
Well, I think this question refers to the life cycle emissions of gas. Where it is true that liquefaction is an energy-intensive process. That is true. However, even with the energy intensity of liquefaction, what really matters in this respect is not the energy use of the gas infrastructure, but methane leakage. Because methane has a brutal greenhouse gas impact, 28 times carbon dioxide. So even if you have 1 or 2% of methane leaking out from the gas infrastructure, that's an extremely bad news for the environmental desirability for gas. Now, let me advertise here that this year the IEA World Energy Outlook will have a special section dedicated to methane leakage. So stay tuned because we are going to have a very comprehensive analysis on that. But without giving out the details, our impression is that this is more of a management problem than a technological problem. The industry has the engineering and technological capability to build and operate gas infrastructure with an absolutely minimum level of methane leakage. And with the recent improvements of digital and sensor technology, a close to real-time monitoring of gas infrastructure is now becoming technologically possible. So there is a very large difference between the best operators and the worst operators. So what is really needed is to make sure that the industry gets up to the level of the best operators in in a uniform manner. Now, a substantial methane leakage is coming from gas flaring. So when you flare the gas, you never burn it perfectly. So this is why the elimination of gas flaring is one of our top climate policy recommendations. Now, there is a substantial gas flaring in Russia, but I don't want to be unfair that the Russian government is moving in the right direction in terms of tightening regulations to reduce gas flaring. And there is also a substantial gas flaring in West Africa, which I consider especially sad because, of course, that's a region where millions of people still don't have electricity. So I think using that gas, which is today flared in the West African oil fields, and provide electricity to the people of Africa should be regarded as our key development priority. There is a lot of work to be done to really tackle methane leakage, but we think that the technological and the engineering capability is there.
Yeah, and I think the other point of the question actually was to highlight the fact that clearly gas onshore Europe, I guess whether it be unconventional or conventional, has a lot less far to travel and therefore should leak less gas through pipelines. I mean, do you see a positive future for onshore European gas?
The short answer is no. We don't see a credible prospect of a sizable shale gas production emerging in Europe. The geology is more difficult than in the United States. The social and political attitudes towards fracking are much more skeptical than in the United States, and Europe has nowhere near that very capable, very technologically advanced and very competitive oil field service supply chain that the American industry benefits from. I can imagine a shale well or two drilled and fracked in Europe, but I don't believe it will play a meaningful role.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's broaden the topic a bit. I've got a question coming in from Italy here. So you described kind of historic levels of decline in oil and gas investment. Do you think this points to a security of supply risk in the next couple of years, at least a price spike in both fields?
Well, we have been repeatedly warning about tightening markets and increased volatility in the future. And here I would make a distinction between oil and gas in terms of their globalization. Because both in the case of oil and gas, we see a recovery of investment in the United States. And also the American shale industry has been extraordinarily impressive in improving its technology and reducing its costs. However, oil, which is a globalized market, if you have a market tightening, American light tight oil production ramps up and helps the stabilization of the supply-demand fundamentals. Whereas in the case of gas, the United States is building LNG export facilities, but building an LNG export facility takes you 3 to 5 years if you're lucky. So a rapid ramp up of American shale gas production cannot have a rapid stabilizing impact outside the United States unless export capacities also ramp up. So in the case of LNG, which is a long lead time, capital intensive business, we have been concerned about the collapse of investment confidence.
Okay. I mean, talking of costs and LNG, which you mentioned earlier, you spoke about cost deflation, and we have a question on that issue. You said that some of it was, you felt, embedded cost deflation. Now, how confident are you that the cost of developing, particularly oil and gas, but I guess across the energy sphere, is not going to rebound if prices rebound?
To some extent, it will rebound. Yes, so there is a cyclical component to it. But at the same time, we also see a very strong management determination by the industry, this time is different attitude, to review project management practices and achieve a structural improvement in project management efficiency. With standardization, with more modular designs, and all of this has a real impact. And also, And also, we shouldn't forget that the oil and gas industry is extremely IT intensive. In fact, there is a lot of discussion about the digitization of the energy sector. But when people discuss the digitization of the energy sector, they almost immediately jump into smart grids and solar power, whereas the use of big data in 3D seismic is an extremely important application of digitization. So more precise drilling, more precise targeting of the sweet spots in shale drilling, better reservoir management for conventional reservoirs, enhanced recovery, and so on. So all of this technological progress is not going to be unlearned if oil prices increase. Having said that, yes, there will be unavoidably some cost inflation if investment picks up. And I think also the industry also learned some hard lessons about some of the drivers of the cost inflation, which, if with a bit of a simplification, if you have a very large, very complex project in a very remote location, in a country which does not have a strong service industry and does not have good skilled labor, chances are that you will have cost inflation problems. And one of the reasons why there is a much stronger investor appetite for American LNG projects than for some of the more remote locations, that in the United States, you build your project in the Gulf Coast of Mexico, which is an already established industrial area. Infrastructure is there, the skilled labor is there, the service companies are there, so it's a much better, you have a much better chance to manage projects in a cost-efficient fashion.
Okay, thanks. There's another kind of broader question here, which harks back to my first one actually, which is, there appears to be a kind of profusion of energy forecast to 2050 and different balances of fossil fuels and renewables. We've got, even within the IEA, obviously, new policy scenario in the 450. The question is, based on your presentation, what do you think is realistic as opposed to wishful thinking?
Well, making predictions is always difficult, especially about the future. And unavoidably, for our 2050 projection, you have to make assumptions. You have to make technological assumptions, and you have to make political assumptions. Now, very reasonable people can have divergent views about technological prospects, like how rapidly electricity storage technology could improve, how fast electric cars will spread, and so on. And very similarly, the political assumptions can also be different. So in the World Energy Outlook new policy scenario, we take cautious assumptions on technology. So for example, in the World Energy Outlook, we have the cost of electric batteries declining by half with gradual learning by doing mass manufacturing type progress. But we don't have disruptive, radically new storage technologies entering the market. Such disruptive technological revolutions are possible and even desirable, but by nature they are unpredictable. And also in the World Energy Outlook, we take also cautious policy assumptions, and of course sometimes we have to revise them. So for example, in the 2016 World Energy Outlook, when analyzing the United States, we did the analysis and we did the modeling from the assumption that President Obama's Clean Power Plan will be implemented. Now, I'm sure you follow the developments from the United States. This assumption might be revised in the next World Energy Outlook, and that can lead to different numbers. So the reason why we revise the modeling and the analysis all the time is that we always incorporate fresh information when it comes in. Certainly, what we see that under the energy policies that are currently being implemented, with the energy technologies that are currently available, the world is not going to reach the Paris Agreement climate targets. So in order to reach those Paris Agreement climate targets, you would need a combination of two things. One, energy policy measures which are significantly stronger than the ones currently being implemented. And the second, an accelerated technological progress and accelerated innovation in the energy industry. And we don't see these two things as a choice. We will need the combination of these things in order to achieve the Paris targets.
And okay, we're coming to the end of our time now. I guess the final question, just to throw in, is in order to kind of reach the investment targets that you're talking about, in order to find the money available for investing in both fossil fuels and renewables, financing is presumably going to be quite a big issue. I mean, given the levels of uncertainty that you paint in your forecasts, do you see innovation in financing, as a trend in the investment in the energy industry?
Definitely. So, for example, the American LNG projects, which have an unbundled midstream business model, that you don't invest in upstream and liquefaction in an integrated project, but you invest only in liquefaction and you have a tolling model. That's a very important business model and very important financing innovation, because this tolling model with the tolling contracts enables project financing and a quite high leverage. So the most capital intensive part of the value chain, the liquefaction train, can benefit from low cost of capital. That's a very important component of the competitiveness of American LNG. Very similarly, on the clean energy, renewable energy side, we are very, very excited about the emergence of non-energy corporations in the renewable space. So a company like Google would never invest in an oil field, but Google is $1 billion size investor into wind and solar power. They have very large electricity consumption in their data centers, and they want clean energy supply chain supplying their data centers with clean energy. And this type of non-energy corporate renewable investment, that was around $50 billion last year, which can be companies and it can be households, middle class consumers spending their own money on solar panels on the rooftop. And there's also a very interesting financial innovation helping those families, the various solar leasing programs in the United States. So innovation in financing is very, very important. And in fact, it explains to a considerable degree the success of some of the technologies. So when we assessed the cost declines for wind and solar power, our conclusion was that the technology improvements explain only roughly half of the observed cost decline for wind and solar power. Wind and solar technology has been improving, but it has not been improving as rapidly as the decline of the contract prices. The decline in cost of capital and the broader availability of financing played an incredibly important role.
Okay, great. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. So thanks very much to László, and thanks for all of you for joining us today. I've been told that the slides will be available on the Flame website, and we hope to continue the discussion at the Flame conference this May in Amsterdam. At that event, László will be presenting the session called World Energy Investment Outlook, and I'll be presenting a session that looks at the cost and competitiveness of Russian gas exports. To learn more about Flame, you can follow the links on the screen below. But for now, thanks very much and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to see you in Amsterdam.
Really good. Thanks, László.
Thank you.
Super.